with, stories linked to Osama bin Laden, okay? When the events takes place, I'm very skeptical about Osama bin Laden, period. I'm skeptical about that we really dropped the guy in the middle of the ocean. I'm like, I'm there on what happened. I don't even believe. Why would you drop? We've never dropped an ass in the middle of the ocean. Well, because it's a martyr. You don't want people to go celebration at his funeral plot and all this other stuff. I don't know. I mean, the difference is Transformers drops Megatron in the middle of the ocean. Then a couple of years later, they drop Osama bin Laden in the middle of the ocean. I don't know if it was inspired by the movie or not. I don't want to speculate. Let my creativity go there. You guys don't have to go there. But bin Laden, stories about where he goes, where he was at, who he met with. What things do we know about bin Laden?
Well, I was a very big supporter of when George Bush went up to the Trade Center. I was there at 9/11, and he put his hand up in the air. I was there with him, with the firefighters. And he said, we're going to get you. We're going to come find you. I figured that it must have been bin Laden in Afghanistan. So I got all fired up and said, I'm with you, Mr. President, all the way. I was concerned about our troops being harassed in Afghanistan the way the Russian troops were. I took 2 other members of Congress and went with Al Santoli, a decorated Vietnam veteran, New York Times bestseller, with intelligence ties. We went to Rome, and we met with King Zahir Shah in exile without U.S. government approval. We went to his family's home, and we convinced, I have the photos, King Zahir Shah to go back to Afghanistan and convene a Loya Jirga of all the tribes to accept the American troops when they came in so our troops would be protected. I took every step I could to protect the American troops. Then I was doing my job in the Congress because I couldn't trust the intel being provided by the CIA. As the vice chairman of the Defense Committee and Homeland Security, they would spin the data. I would get better information from defense reporters like Bill Gertz than I would from the agency. So I had my own intel team. These are people that work for the agencies. There were about 15 of them that worked for the CIA, DIA, NSA, FBI, and I would meet with them for breakfast in the Capitol. And they would feed me raw data. And they fed me raw data after 9/11 that Osama bin Laden was seen in a town called Lauderdale. I had no idea where Lauderdale was, so I went up the street and bought a map at the bookstore. You have that map right here that I bought 25 years ago, or 25 years ago. And I looked on the map and I found Lauderdale, 10 kilometers inside the border of Pakistan and Iran, in an area called Baluchistan. I then went to a classified briefing for the full committee, closed briefing. Now I'm the vice chairman of the committee. At the time I was the acting chairman, the chairman wasn't there. And in front of 60 members I said to the CIA, I have information that bin Laden's been sighted in Lauderdale. What can you tell me? Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. I was outraged. We're sending kids to Afghanistan to look for bin Laden, and they can't deny that he's in a town called Lauderdale 3 months later. My raw intelligence people tell me that he's being treated at a military hospital in Tehran. I go back to the classified briefing in front of the whole committee, and I ask the question. I get the same response. Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. And I said, what the hell's going on here? We're now months into this whole operation. We're sending kids over to Afghanistan, and you're telling me bin Laden may be in Baluchistan. Then I get the most respected Democrat in the House, Jack Murtha, chairman of the Senate of the House Appropriations Defense Committee, former Marine, very well-respected member, and a friend of mine. Murtha sends over Ron Klink. Now, Murtha's dead, but Ron Klink's alive. And it says to me, to Ron has information from Anak. They used to work for the agency about Iran. And Jack says, go see Curt. He investigates these things. Ron Klink came to my office. And Ron Klink will verify this. He's a man of honor. He's alive. I said, Ron, how can I help? He said, Congressman, I have an acquaintance here. I need you to talk to him. Jack said, come to you. I said, okay. He brings this knock in. He said, Congressman Weldon, I want you to help me go to Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? He said, well, that's where I used to work for the agency. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's where bin Laden is, and there's a $25 million reward. You help me get to Tehran, I'll leave my credentials there in the hotel, and I'll go down and bring you back dead or alive, because there's $25 million reward. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of a battle with the agency right now. I can't do that. Now, that's the third incident. Then I get a request from the Department of Interior. They want to bring in the head of the International Falconry Association. Now, that's not unusual because I'm the Republican on the Migratory Bird Commission. The Migratory Bird Commission oversees all the wildlife refuges in North America. John Dingell was a Democrat There were 2 senators and 3 cabinet members. So I figured he wants to talk about birds. Okay, I'll talk about birds. This fellow from Maine, Alan Perot, brings in 2 falcons, $1 million birds on his shoulders. He's a Sikh, very wealthy family. He said, Mr. Chairman, thank you for greeting with me. I said, okay. I said, I've devoted my life to falcons. I worked with the UN on the international falcon treaties. And he said, I was in the base camps that trained the children of the royal families on the sport of falconry. I said, well, that's really interesting. I said, how can I help you with these birds? They're beautiful. He said, I want you to help me go to Iran. Now, he knows nothing about what I've been given. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? He said, my falconers are seeing bin Laden's birds flying in Iran. They'll accept me there. You get me into Iran, I'll tag his birds and take you to exactly where he is. That's the 4th. They take me out of office. I get a call from Michael Scheuer. Michael Scheuer said, Congressman, at my home, do you remember me? I said, yeah, Michael. He said, I worked for the CIA my whole career. I said, I remember. He said, my job was the director of the bin Laden task force.
Alex Station.
I said, well, he said bin Laden task force. I said, what can I help you with? He said, I'm seeing information from the birdman that I was never shown when I was in charge of the bin Laden task force. I think he's right. We want to do a film. We want you to be a part of it. I said, not after what they did to my family. I'm not getting involved. Thank you, but no. I hang up the phone. 3 months later, I get a call from General McInerney, a decorated American hero. And he calls me at my home and said, Congressman Weldon, I'm working with Michael Scheuer and the Birdman, and we want you involved. I said, General, I'm not going to do it. In the end, I end up with 10 silver bullets, including 2 royal family members from 2 separate royal families. The bin Laden was placed in Iran after 9/11. The U.S. has plausible deniability because they arranged it through other countries. The ultimate was a person who's worked for our government for 50 years. He's a knock. He's not from the U.S. I will reveal his information privately, but not publicly, and I'll take a polygraph. I met with him, and he said, through one of the people he handled when he was active, he said, you're right about many things, Mr. Chairman. I respect you. I said, well, thank you. He said, you're right about bin Laden. He was in Iran. And he was placed there with U.S. knowledge and information, without the knowledge of the U.S., of the Iranian government. A few years ago, I think it was 5 years ago, we killed Soleimani. I don't even think Trump knows this. He took credit for killing Soleimani, and he deserves credit, because Soleimani was a criminal. I text my friend, was that the man? He texts back within 1 minute, yes. The deal to place bin Laden in Iran was not cut with Ahmadinejad. It was not cut with the head of the Iranian government. It was cut with the head of the IRG. And if you think back to when the Shah was in power, the Iranian intelligence was largely trained by U.S. intelligence. Those friendships never left. When the radical regimes took over in Iran, they didn't change their intelligence. And those friendships and relationships continued. The real investigation needs to be, what involvement did our intelligence have with Iranian intelligence? And was that involved in placing bin Laden in Iran while we sent thousands of American kids to Afghanistan and 2,500 came back in body bags?
I mean, when you hear that story about Iran, we all heard what? We heard Pakistan, we heard, that he escaped and, poor coordination among U.S. and Afghan troops and, all this other stuff. We hear that. But mainly we heard about the city. What is that city called? Abbottabad, right?
Abbottabad.
Pakistan.
Yeah.
So no one talks about Iran. However, the part about Iran here that's kind of strange is Osama bin Laden himself never confirmed to have been in Iran. However, some of his family members and senior al-Qaeda figures did reportedly seek shelter in Iran.
I absolutely were.
After the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. That includes bin Laden's son.
That's right.
Saeed bin Laden.
Exactly.
And others who were later detained by Iranian authorities.
And I asked an official
But you're convinced he was there?
Absolutely. 1,000%. I'll take a polygraph. I told you I'll take a polygraph on what I know. I'll take a polygraph. I have 10 silver bullet sources that bin Laden was placed. And when the Birdman was questioning the Iranian consulate office at the UN, because there is no Iranian embassy here, they were saying, why do you keep coming to us saying that bin Laden's in our country? You would never harbor bin Laden. But they would go back and, ask the questions in Tehran, why does he keep saying this? Finally, Ahmadinejad came over to the UN to give a speech. And the Falcon, the Birdman from America, got George Stephanopoulos to ask the question. And I know George Stephanopoulos from when he worked on the House floor for Dick Gephardt.
This is the one you're talking about.
When I first went to Congress, George Stephanopoulos. So Stephanopoulos asked Ahmadinejad the question kind of smirkingly. Some of the wackos in this country are saying that you're harboring bin Laden. And obviously Ahmadinejad said, no way will we ever harbor bin Laden. He went back to Tehran. That's when they kicked him out of Iran over to Pakistan. Now, Ahmadinejad, I still have contacts to. Now, if necessary, I can bring Ahmadinejad on the show. He's afraid I'll be killed, but he'll verify what I just told you. That's what's wrong with our country. The Iranian people have never been our enemy. That's what my book was about. When I wrote the book in 2005, I said Iran is not the enemy. You see the title of my book? I said the CIA is the problem. They're playing games. This book was endorsed by Jim Woolsey. 3-page letter. The former director of the CIA.
I had him on the podcast.
He's a great guy.
And the book was endorsed by Jack Caravelli, Al Gore's CIA advisor. 1-page letter. They endorsed the book. The Iranians published my book in Farsi on their own. It became a bestseller because it says the people of Iran and the U.S. are not enemies. The people in these countries are never our enemies. It's the games we play, not the games we allow people to play. They're out for power and money. We've got to stop that.
Rob, can you play that clip with Ahmadinejad? So here's the clip that you're talking about. Go for it.
One final question. There's a new documentary out that says that Osama bin Laden
Feather cocaine.
is living in Tehran. Is Osama bin Laden in Tehran?
Your question is laughable.
Why?
The U.S. government has invaded Afghanistan in order to arrest bin Laden. They probably know where bin Laden is. If they don't know where bin Laden is, why did they invade? First, they invaded. Then they tried to find out where he is. Is that logical? Do you think this is logical?
What I think is that you didn't answer my question. Is he in Tehran or not?
Our position is quite clear. Some journalists have said bin Laden is in Iran. These words don't have legal value. Our position towards Afghanistan and against terrorism is quite clear.
Is it true or not?
Maybe you know, but I don't know.
I'm asking you, you're the president of Iran.
I don't know such a thing. You are giving news which is very strange.
So let me ask it a different way. If you did know that Osama bin Laden was in Tehran, would you show him hospitality? Would you expel him? Would you arrest him?
I heard that Osama bin Laden is in Washington, D.C.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. He's there because he was a previous partner of Mr. Bush. They were colleagues, in fact, in the old days. You know that. They worked together. Mr. bin Laden never cooperated with Iran, but he cooperated with Mr. Bush.
I'll ask one more time and then I'll let you go. If you knew that Osama bin Laden was in Tehran, which you say you don't, if you knew, would you expel him? Would you arrest him? Would you show him hospitality?
Our borders are closed to the illegal entry of anyone. Anyone, whoever that may be. Whether it's the 3 American mountaineers, Mr. bin Laden, or anyone else, the borders are closed. Our position is clear.
But you deny categorically that he's in Tehran today. He is not. Osama bin Laden is not in Tehran
You're
today?
saying he was.
Rest assured that he's in...
That's the first time I've never talked to you about this in advance, and you pulled that up right away. It's exactly what I said. And I know the people that got Stephanopoulos to ask that question. I would ask you one more thing to look at. Remember that airplane that somebody captured on the tarmac in Tehran that was unidentified, unloading pallets and pallets of American cash? Do you remember that story? And no one ever explained it? I wonder why that occurred. Remember the pallets of cash and the estimates? We've got to stop allowing these games to be played. The people of Iran are not our enemy.
This plane to that plane.
I can't tie that. All I can tell you is I'm aware of that. That's something
But they're 15 years apart of the event.
And
You're talking about the $400 million cash.
There was more than one flight of planes into Tehran. Let me say
Obama
that.
administration secretly arranged a plane delivery of $400 million in cash on the same day Iran released 4 American prisoners and formally implemented the nuclear deal, U.S. officials confirmed. Barack Obama approved the $400 million transfer, which he announced in January as part of the Iranian nuclear deal. The money was flown to Iran in wooden pallets, stacked with Swiss francs, euros, and other currencies as the first installment of the $1.7 billion settlement resolving claims at the International Tribunal at The Hague over a failed arms deal under the time of the Shah. a fifth American was also released by Iran separately. What is your correlation between the two?
The correlation that I can tell you is that the U.S. Was aware of and helped facilitate the placement of bin Laden in Iran. They retain plausible deniability. That's the fancy word they use. They maintain plausible deniability by using other countries. And well, I'll give you one more story about Iran. I did most of the work for the Congress with Russia. Steny Hoyer was my co-chair. And as you know, the big deal right now is the Iran nuclear program. Well, let me tell you what happened in the 90s that I will verify and give you, again, a polygraph on. I was very upset when we had evidence that the Russian Ministry of Atomic Energy was helping Iran with a Bushehr reactor. And I went to the Ministry of Atomic Energy, and I took 2 members of the House who are today senators. And I'll give you the photograph. You can get it off my website of me with Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and Lindsey Graham, meeting with the Minister of Atomic Energy in Moscow, Mikhailov. They call him the Hawk. And I said to him, we want you to stop helping Iran with a nuclear program at Bushehr because this is going to come back to hurt both of our countries. This is in the 1990s. Mikhailov said, Congressman, we can't do anything about these deals that we're doing. I was very outraged, and I let the Russians know that. But one of the most pro-American leaders in Russia who did the non-Lugar program was the head of the nuclear institute in Russia called Kurchatov Institute in Moscow. His name was Dr. Yevgeny Velikov. He died in December. He was a very good partner of Sam Nunn and Dick Lugar. That's how I met him. Velikov became a good friend of mine. When Bush reached out and made that famous speech in 2001, that he looked in Putin's eyes and saw his inner soul and realized this was a man he could trust. You can pull that speech up. That was Bush saying this. I took that seriously, and I pressed Velikov to do something about the Iran program. Velikov came to my office, and I have a 3-hour interview with Velikov in my oral history. It's never been released, in Moscow. And Velikov said, Curt, Putin wants to offer to the U.S. a bilateral, 50-50, overseeing any fissile material going into Iran. We turned them down. We turned them down under George Bush in the early 2000s. I'll take a polygraph.
By the way, on a different note, the Federal Reserve is often, I used to consult with the Federal Reserve's intelligence folks, and yes, they have an intelligence program, and moving whole plane loads of cash is not an uncommon thing for the Federal Reserve, just saying. It's a common occurrence.
I can see that.
Hi, I'm Kurt Weldon, teacher, firefighter, father of 5, family man, who spent 20 years in the Congress after serving as mayor and county chairman of my county in suburban Philadelphia. My intent is to give experiences and information and knowledge about the 104 countries that I led delegations to during my 20 years in the Congress, and all of the work that I did on behalf of America's firefighters and first responders traveling around the country. If you'd like to connect with me, connect on Minect, and I will get back to you.
Hi, I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer. I'm a senior intelligence officer / retired spy with a great deal of information regarding my 30-plus years of operational experience, plus 9/11 issues relating to able danger. I wrote a book, Operation Dark Heart, New York Times bestseller. I'm the National Security Advisor of the Trump 2020 campaign. I'm an elected official in North Carolina as a county commissioner. So reach out to me via Minect. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to give you answers that will help you. Look forward to talking to you.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.